it. So good morning, everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and start advancing the slides. So it is in fact August 17th, and here we are at the August UCCCN meeting, and here's what it will look like today. We have our usual welcome, which we'll do in just a minute. We really like to take a few minutes and try and know who's with us and know where you're from and what you do. I think it's really an important part of the connecting and networking for UCCCN. Then we'll do a few announcements and any updates about the medical home portal. Then it's your time, and we really encourage you to be thinking about if you have anything you'd like to bring up during the brainstorming period, where you can talk about cases, whether they're new and troublesome and you'd like some help, or if you have an update. We always like to hear those. If you know of new resources, new services, those are always great to share. If you're doing anything with quality improvement in your practice that you want to share, anything about motivational interviewing that you've had an opportunity to use, all those kinds of things. That's what we love to talk about there. And then we're looking forward to our annual topic on IEPs, 504 plans, special education in the school system generally. And we have a Utah Parent Center parent consultant who will be joining us today, Leslie Hansen. And then we will wrap up by 10. All right, so we'll start with welcome and introductions. So I'm Mindy Tueller, and I am the Director of Operations for the Medical Home Portal and the facilitator for this group, the Utah Children's Care Coordination Network. And we're just so pleased to have you all joining us. For those of you who might be new or newer, this group actually started about 8 years ago. It's an outgrowth of a project in the Department of Pediatrics at the university, having to do with medical home and care coordinators and care coordination within pediatric practices. And so it went so well in that project, we just decided to keep doing it, and here we are. And it's been a really positive thing, I think. So really happy to see all of you here today. And the way we do this on our virtual meetings is that I just look down the participant list, and if you are able, we love it if I say your name and you're able to show your camera and talk. We love that. If that doesn't work for you for whatever reason, no problem. Please feel free to use the chat. It's one of the side effects of doing everything virtually that we want to take full advantage of. So please feel free to use the chat throughout the meeting. And if that's the way you want to tell us who you are, that's great. So please let us know who you are, what your role is, and what organization you work with. All right, so Michelle, I see you next.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm Michelle Redfield. I'm the administrative assistant for the Medical Home Portal, UCCCN, and General Pediatrics.
Thanks, Michelle. We can't really do any of this without her. Appreciate her so much. All right, and I see Amber next. And Amber, if you want to pronounce your name for us, that would be great too, if you're able.
Hi, I'm Amber. I'm from San Juan County. I'm an ISP care coordinator, and it's a Wusanich.
Okay, welcome. And we're so happy you're with us. Great.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, Amy Nance is with us, and we're really pleased about that.
Good morning. I'm Amy Nance, and I am the newly appointed Office Director for Children with Special Health Care Needs at the Department of Health and Human Services. So.
Fantastic. All right. Okay, I see Ann Chambers next.
Good morning. I am a parent support specialist at Help Me Grow Utah. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we're so pleased to have you with us, Ann. Are you located where are you located in the state?
We're in Provo, Utah.
Okay. Fantastic. Welcome, Ann. All right. Ashley Donham.
Hello, my name is Ashley Dunham, and I am with the Utah Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Substance Use and Mental Health. I work with Leah Colburn and Eric Talahara. My position specifically focuses on intellectual and developmental disability and mental health.
Oh my gosh, fantastic. Well, we're so pleased that you're joining us and hope that you're able to do that regularly. Thanks for being here. Great. Okay, Athena.
Hi, I'm Athena Parker. I'm with the Medical Home Portal, and I work as the services support manager. So I help support all of our partner states with the Medical Home Portal.
Glad to have you with us. Next, I see Dora.
Good morning. Sorry, it took me a second there. My name is Dora. I'm the professional relations coordinator for Shriners Children's in Salt Lake City, and I'm here to assist if you have any questions.
We love having our Shriners folks on these meetings, so thanks for being here, Dora.
Thank you so much.
All right, Evelyn Hernandez. Looks like maybe in the chat. Evelyn, she's the care coordinator from Utah Valley Pediatrics Cherry Tree office. Wonderful. Glad you're here, Evelyn. All right, Heather Carlson.
Hey, good morning. I'm Heather Carlson. I'm a nurse care coordinator for Eric Christensen's team, the Integrated Services Program, and I'm located up in the Ogden area.
Glad you could join us this morning, Heather. All right, let's have Ileana.
Hi, this is Ileana and Janet, and we're from Southwest Children's Clinic. I am the manager and Janet's the coordinator, care coordinator.
We always love it when we get 2 for 1 from you guys. Welcome. Good morning, guys. Glad you're with us. Okay, James Moore.
Hello, yeah, I'm James. I am a nurse care manager at Northern Utah Pediatrics here in Layton.
Fabulous. Glad you're with us, James. Glad you could join us. All right. Hey, it's Julie Southwick.
Hi, this is Julie. I am the transition specialist with Eric's team at Health and Human Services and a health educator for Utah Birth Defect Network.
Wonderful. So glad you're with us, Julie. And the first Natalie Allen.
Hi, I'm the nurse practitioner for the Integrated Services Program. Eric's team work with a variety of care coordinators across the state.
Wonderful. And Natalie Carter.
Hi, I'm Natalie Carter. I'm also with Eric's team. I'm care coordinator for him and also the public health nurse for Central Utah.
Oh, excellent. So glad you're with us. Thank you. All right. Rebecca Ciolino.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Ciolino, and I work at the University of Utah, and I'm a care manager at the family practice in Farmington.
Excellent. So happy to have you with us, Rebecca.
Thank you.
All right, Tawny. I've got a chat. Open that. Tawny Dunn is a nurse at Northern Utah Pediatrics in Layton. She's in clinic, so she'll be on and off, no problem. And Amy Cherry told her about these meetings, and she's excited to join. Well, we're grateful to Amy, and we're happy to have you too, Tawny, whatever we can get of you. So, thank you. All right, and Walt.
Good morning. I'm Walt with Integrated Services Program, also with Eric's group, and I'm a care coordinator here in Salt Lake City.
Fabulous. Glad you're with us this morning, Walt. And Eric had another engagement for a little while, so he'll be joining us late, we hope. So, all right, fantastic. Well, if anybody else joins a little bit later, no problem. We will be glad for them to join us, but we're going to move on now. Oops, clearly I'm moving on, right? All right, here we go. We'll get going with the meeting. So obviously you can see that we are a Zoom team, and we like to say that the best experience for Zoom is via some sort of a desktop or laptop. It gives you a few more features, and encourage you to do that if you're able. But we'll, again, take you any way we can get you. And we're going to try and end promptly at 10 and be respectful of your time. All right, so now we'll get to some announcements. Okay, so you may have noticed that we sent out some reminders about this meeting in a couple of different ways, and we apologize for that, but we recognize that some folks on our lists may not actually be receiving some of our emails, and we want to make sure that we understand what's going on and figure out what that problem is. So that's the reason we've been sending those out a couple of times, and we hope that you're here in part because you're getting those without any problem. But rather than taking more time in this meeting, just know that if we are hitting you with one email and not the other, if you could let us know about that, that's going to help us to troubleshoot this and get this all worked out. We don't want anyone not receiving our emails who wants them. All right. As you know, we always like to remind you about the ongoing Spark autism study. It is a genetics study. The University of Utah is one of a number of sites throughout the nation that is doing this, and it's pretty cool. And so we want you to be able to know about this for the families that you work with. And as you can see on that right side of the slide, it's neat because they might be able to find possible genetic causes of autism in their family. They're certainly helping with autism research for the future, and they might learn about other autism research studies they can participate. So it's got a lot of really neat opportunities there. And then at the end of the day, it's really easy. You don't have to leave your house and you get a gift card. So if you're interested in having more information about this for the families you work with, just let us know and we'll connect you to the Spark folks, and we can get you flyers and anything else that you might need. And then I wanted to make sure that you're aware of Transition University through the Utah Parent Center. They have their next series on this coming up in September. We will make sure to send out this flyer to the list after the meeting, but I wanted to highlight it here. And again, this would be fantastic for you to make sure that the families you work with are aware of this if it makes sense for them. So you can attend in person or online. Pretty nice to have both those options. And it is a 3-series program. So hopefully they can attend all of those. These are really well done. And we're very impressed with what the Utah Parent Center is doing around transition. All right, Pediatric Project ECHO. Well, it's August 17th, which doesn't feel like fall to me, but our fall session begins today. Seems a little bit like, the Christmas stuff showing up at Costco in September, but here we are, fall session, and we're going to actually have Shriners presenting, and we're very fortunate to have not one, but I think ultimately 5 presentations by Shriner throughout the series this fall. And we're looking forward to hearing Jill Connor, the Director of Business Development, explain what some of the changes have been at Shriners. And we hope that you might be able to join us. That's at noon today. And if you're interested, actually, maybe I'll ask Michelle to post the link to the Pediatric Project ECHO page in the chat so that you can jump right on that if you're interested. All right, so medical home portal updates. We've actually had a bit of a break with some of the things that are going on with our content, but we do have a new juvenile diabetes type 1 module that should be out very soon, which is something we've been wanting for a long, long time. So that's a big deal for us. Now I'm going to pop out of my PowerPoint and show you some of the results from the survey that we asked you to take last month and then the year before, if you'll recall. So let's see, let me get to the top of those. All right, so this was the mental and behavioral health survey that we did, and it was pretty interesting. So I'm going to go through this really fast. Again, we can make sure that you have access to these if you're interested, but out of 12 people who responded, we had 8 say that they practice mental health screening at well child visits and 4 who do not. 9 that say they do not screen for traumatic stress and 3 who said yes. 11 who are not aware of the Intermountain Traumatic Stress Care Process Model. So some guidelines to help when there's, and a positive on that screen. And then all of those folks said they'd like to learn more about traumatic stress in children. So I think we'll be following up on that. And then these are the other mental health screeners that we saw respondents talk about: anxiety, autism, depression. 7 are using a depression screener, and then others. 3 indicated that they're using other. And we got 9 responding saying they do not feel that their practice has enough resources for referring or treating children who have a positive mental health screener. Makes sense. And interestingly enough, about half have a mental health provider on staff. So that was actually fantastic news. Half do not of the respondents. And it looks like the majority are trying to use the medical home portal to find resources for families who have children who've screened positive. Come on. Maybe that's it. That must be it. All right. So whenever we do a survey, we want to try and make sure and share those results with you. So more to come on those topics. All right, Athena, I'm going to let you take it over for a minute.
Sorry, just trying to get to the right screen here. Okay, so I wanted, since we're talking about IEPs and 504s today, I wanted to give an update specifically around some of the changes we've had to education categories within the Utah services directory. So I'm going to just scroll down to the education categories, and if you weren't familiar before, this is just kind of one giant list, and we've tried to break it down a little bit in grouping and more in categories. So we now have an adult education options, and under that we've grouped your college disability centers, community and continuing education, scholarships, financial aid, and vocational education. And then additionally, we've grouped some of the early education services together, like educational testing and assessment, Head Start, early Head Start, and preschools. And then you can see we have kind of a range of other categories related to education, anything from like parenting help to specific like ASL and Braille instruction, your school districts, student disability services, tutoring services, etc. We've also added a category around, this is actually, it's down in transition. Let me scroll down to there. And we have this new category, education transition services. So I'm working on getting things categorized into that, and would love any feedback, especially from this group, about programs that should be included in this category. So again, you can use our feedback buttons on the portal, or you can also, suggest new providers here, like I said, with these kind of feedback buttons, or if you see something that's listed here that you think shouldn't be, you can also give feedback right on these as well using the suggest edit buttons. And that would help us keep those lists more updated. One last quick thing, since I was scrolling down that big list, and if you're like, gosh, I just can't remember what she scrolled to, just a note, just a reminder that you can always type in the word, for example, education here, and it's going to bring up all of our categories related to education, which may help narrow down your search even further. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Athena. Yeah, and we really do like hearing your feedback. Please, please give us feedback. All right, let me get, okay, are you guys seeing my slides again? Great, all right. Okay, so let's do our brainstorming. As I mentioned before, this is really your time. So even though sometimes there might be a little bit of uncomfortable silence, that's what I do. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. And anyone who wants to go ahead and take the stage, you're welcome to do that again by talking, unmuting yourself and talking, or putting it in the chat.
I don't have a case, but I have something I want to talk about really quick for everybody to be aware of. Is that okay? Okay. So we've been getting kind of a rash of calls over the last few months of families who are getting their reviews for their child or adult's SSI. And that's the supplemental security income through Social Security. A lot of our pediatric kids have it, depending on the parent's income. And the majority of our more involved adults possibly will have it. Because of the housing costs rising and the rental costs rising, that changes the amount of rent that we're going to need to be saying that we are charging our kids. I'll speak from my own, we haven't had a review yet, but you know, we've forever said that my son was, you know, you have to claim that your adult is paying rent. With kids, it may not be the same as much, but just watch what they're asking about in reviews. They're getting really technical. They're asking families to look at the housing costs in their area and compare to that on what they should be charging for rent. My son would not have a place to live if that were the case right now, because the amount that they receive, and this is more in the adult arena, but everybody just be aware and let families know they may want to raise the amount. We've been saying for a long time that Adam was paying $600 per month rent, and that was okay with SSI. But now that costs have risen, we're probably going to have to go up to about $750 and take it to the limit of, you know, and that'll leave him less than $100 for cost. But what they will do if you don't charge them enough rents, and even at $750, I've heard that they're still comparing to what you would rent a room for in Salt Lake City or wherever you live in Utah, which is not comparable. But what they're doing is they're asking parents for their mortgage information. They're asking if the person lives with the family, you know, what's your mortgage? How do we know how much you're charged? You know, how do we know if that's right? They've told people to get a realtor to come out to their house and assess what it would cost to rent a room there. And you can't just call a realtor and say, hey, SSI wants you to do this. I mean, they're asking some kind of ridiculous stuff. So I would advise, there is a form out there. It's SSA 795. And it is the claimant statement of claimant form. And it's basically a blank form. You want to, you know, fill in the person that receives SSI's information and the person that's making the statement. And that would be the parent renting the room or the individual that's renting the room to the person. And basically make the statement of, you know, I, Tina Purcells, am charging room and board to Adam Purcells of $750 per month, and then get that in, you know, and just, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You're not a landlord, but you do want to make the statement that you are charging that much rent. Make a copy of that, make a couple copies of it. And if they say they don't receive it, send another one, take it straight down to the SSI offices if you need to make sure that's in the file.
Thank you, Tina.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's getting messy. And what they'll do is if you are not charging enough rent compared to whatever they're measuring it by, it's different workers have different, go get a realtor, one has said, you know, let me see your mortgage papers, the other has said. So they've got weird ways of figuring it out. But what they'll do is if you aren't charging enough, and they say, oh, you're only charging 600, and it looks like fair market value in your neighborhood is 850. So you're giving them an in-kind donation, right, of 250. So we're going to go ahead and take 250 off of their actual monthly benefit. It is really happening. It's a ridiculous calculation on how they do it, but it's true. So anybody that you guys know that's receiving SSI that is, just give them a tip or have them call me and I'll explain it to them.
Thank you, Tina. Okay, really important. All right, anyone else?
And I guess, if our rent is rising, I guess their rent should rise too, but it's a little, I think their benefit should hopefully rise at some point.
Okay, I have a question about that because I actually just had a patient that her SSI got canceled. So you have to say you're charging your adult child rent for them to even get SSI? I'm confused.
So the thought behind SSI is that it's a supplemental security. That income is for someone who could not otherwise obtain substantial gainful employment.
So so that could be a reason they canceled it because like they're living with their mom and they don't need it, or?
No, it's because, mom has to state. And the funny thing about it is when you're filling out SSI applications, they don't say, we are requiring rent to be paid. It's somewhere in all of the red tape.
Yeah,
But
that's what she said something about rent, but I don't think she understood what they were saying. I think they couldn't really come out and say like, you need to charge your daughter rent. But she was saying like, they said if somebody paid rent, then our income would go up. And she's like, it doesn't make any sense. They canceled it. So I will tell her.
So
now.
here's
Form
here's
again.
how to make sense of it is SSI is intended for people to be able to live if they can't work, or if they can't work a full-time job that would pay bills or fully pay bills. So if they're living with someone, which most days people are, because $841 a month just doesn't get you anywhere with a rental anymore. They need to be charged room and board. They need to be given a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen. It states it a little weirdly in the application, but what it means is, do they have full access to the kitchen to cook and put things in the fridge and whatever you do in a kitchen? Do they have full access to close the bathroom door and have a private bathroom? That's what they're asking there. But so SSI requires that. They want to know that housing is being taken care of through their benefit, and whatever's left over can be spent on necessities. But yeah, so that's SSA 795 form. We want to get that to mom and have her fill it out. Get it into the Social Security office and inform the caseworker that called her, whoever it is, that that's been submitted and she would like to have it reviewed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Now that is tricky stuff. It's so nice.
It really is. It's getting trickier too. I don't know why.
All right, thank you so much. Anyone else?
This is Dora. Thank you so much for announcing that Jill's speaking for Shriners today. I have a little flyer and I can send it to you, or if we're short on time, I can just send it to you, but I have it just so you know who's speaking from the Shriners. Or if you're okay, I can share the screen really quick.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, can you see this?
Looks like it's just, yes.
Okay, perfect. So like Mindy shared, Jill's speaking today. And then if you're interested, sounds like they're going to put the registration page on there, but Scott Jerome is speaking on August 31st. You can save that so you can see wheelchair, on-time mobility, safe transportation, special needs. And then on 9/14, common pediatric gait issues. That's our medical director, as well as the director for motion analysis lab and physical therapist. And then on 11/16, pediatric orthopedics 101, pediatric cerebral palsy, and then to finalize is Sonia, as she'll be speaking about scoliosis screenings. Yes. So I'll send this to you, Mindy. If you want to post it, that would be great.
Sure.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Dora. All right. I will share again. Okay. Anyone else? We just have about 2 minutes. I'm gonna go to the next slide and just remind you that, you know, we really do love hearing anytime you're doing something around quality improvement or thinking about it, and also about motivational interviewing. We do try and touch on motivational interviewing relatively often in UCCCN, and we will be having a training on that in November. So we're excited about that opportunity again. Such a great approach and tool. And next month, we're going to be having UPIC come and talk to us about their projects around quality improvement. So I'll just let you know about those things. All right, well, if that's it with brainstorming, we can move on to our main topic, and we look forward to that. We have with us Leslie Hansen from the Utah Parent Center. We really appreciate Leslie being here. And so Leslie, I assume that I can just stop sharing and you'll take the controls and we'll go from there.
Yeah, you can make me a co-host and
let's see if we can do that. I don't think that should be a problem. I'm going to stop sharing and let's see if you're able to take control.
Okay, let me try it. You get to see my messy all my windows open, so that should be great.
You see it.
Awesome. Okay, you guys can see that? Okay, perfect. All right, so I am really excited for this opportunity to speak with you guys today about Section 504s and IEPs. These are the two main things that we use to help students that may need more supports in school for special education. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with IEPs or Section 504s, but we're really going to go through the basics today. Normally this workshop is about an hour and a half long, but I'm going to give you the light version today. But I would really welcome any comments or questions during this the presentation, because I think it's kind of important to be able to ask those questions when you have the questions, because really probably if you have the question, then probably other people do as well. So all right. I did want to talk to you a little bit about the UPC. So, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with the UPC because Tina is part of this as well. But the Utah Parent Center brings programs to families and organizations like yours to talk about the many projects that are housed under the Utah Parent Center. And so I am from something called the PTI project, which are parent consultants that help families with special education. So I do a lot of meetings going to schools and talk to parents about how they can advocate for their children in the educational setting. Our parent consultations are free. We can do those virtually, in person, or over the phone. And we do have several trainings throughout the year on various topics that are important to families as they navigate special education, because it can be a lot and it can be very overwhelming and very intimidating for families to go through that journey. So our goal really is to empower and educate families to be that great advocate for their children that they need. So my name is Leslie Hansen. Again, I am a parent consultant at Utah Parent Center. This is my phone number. You can reach me there, and then also my email. So if you have questions that we didn't get to during this presentation, please call me or email me, and we can get that information to you and even give you that information so you can pass it along to the families that you may serve. Okay. So this is really something that is important to realize about the IEP team. They are partners and they do provide a team. So the aim for this is to provide win-to-win outcomes. So which would include not my way, not your way, but our way. So ideas that come to mind when we're talking about this could be success, committed to the process, mutually beneficial, cooperative. Both parties feel good about what's been done. They're making good decisions and it's satisfying. And what's important to note here is that parents are the specialists on their children. So they are basically the home information specialists, and they have that unique perspective and information about their child that really helps be able to add to the team dynamic of getting the child's needs met. And the educator's role primarily is to be school information specialists. So they're going to have that unique information about school programs and what those services may look like within the school system. So they may be looking at concepts such as, does it fit into the school day? Is this something that's educationally beneficial for the students? So they're going to be looking at those types of things as they go through this process with the parent. Okay, so IDEA governs how states and public agencies provide early intervention, special education, and related services to more than 6.5 million eligible infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. So IDEA is that federal law, and we're going to get more into that into the next slide. And again, if there's questions, I can't see if people have their hands up, so please just shout out. Okay, so the Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, is a federal education law for children with disabilities. And that's going to provide an individualized education program for that child. And an IEP will include special education as well as related services. And again, it's important to really focus in on the word individualized. It's going to be unique for that child. And that's the beauty of it. Okay, special education means specially designed instruction, and this is going to be at no cost to the parents. It's going to also need to meet the unique needs of the child with a disability. And that's going to include instruction conducted in the classroom, in the home, in hospital, or in an institution. And it is important to note too that you can have instruction in physical education, and that can be part of the special education plan. I know that my son needed some extra support in physical education, and so part of his IEP provides goals for him in PE. So, and I've had his PE teacher come to IEP meetings, so it is something that they take very seriously. Okay, so let's talk about free and appropriate public education, or FAPE. So this really is going to be, everything needs to provide FAPE. So when we talk about special education and related services, again, this is going to be at no cost to the parents, no additional cost. And it's going to be provided as directed by the individual education program. So really, FAPE is public education needs to be available to all children with disabilities residing in the state between the ages of 3 and 21. So this education needs to be inclusive. It needs to include children with disabilities and those who have even been suspended or expelled from school. And if we kind of dissect this term a little bit, we're going to look at the word appropriate. And appropriate really is going to mean that your child receives some educational benefit. So there really is no hard and fast rule about what appropriate looks like. It only needs to provide some educational benefit. Are there any questions so far? Okay. All right, so let's talk about charter schools now. They are public schools and they must follow IDEA. So they receive federal funding, and because IDEA is a federal law, they must follow those requirements of a school that would receive that funding. So parents must notify their regular public school by June 30th if they intend to make a change. So, and that's because of funding and just making sure that they've got the proper supports in place. The child must remain in the charter school for the full school year unless permission is given by both the charter school and the regular public school to make a change during the year. And charter schools are responsible for child find for their own students and are responsible for their own evaluations. And we're going to go through this a little bit more as the presentation goes on. But just for the purpose of this explanation, we're going to just talk about child find for just a moment. So child find is actually an obligation that public schools have to seek out and identify those students that may need special education services. So it really is something that they must follow if they receive federal funding. Now, the difference with a private school is that they don't necessarily receive any federal funding, and they don't really need to follow IDEA as it is written. They really don't need to look at child find and try to seek after those children. And so that's going to be the difference there. Okay, if your child has an IEP or you've ever gone to an IEP meeting, you may have come across something called procedural safeguards. And we're going to talk about the key points in procedural safeguards. The procedural safeguards are extremely important because they really do lay out the rights of the parent. And if the parent has, if there's a disagreement between the team, the parent then has recourse. And it does explain all, again, of those parent rights applicable to IDEA, the federal law, and being able to go through dispute resolution. And you should get these every year. So for me, my son's 14. He's had an IEP since he was in preschool. And so I could probably wallpaper my whole house with these pamphlets, but it's really good to look through if someone has time. But usually what the school will do, because it really is just such a huge amount of information to look over and try to process. IEP teams can generally go through those as bullet points and point out those particular procedures that may be important for parents at the time. So these are the key points in the procedural safeguards. Access to records. So it's going to explain what the parent's right is to that. Also, parent and student consent. So what does that parent consent mean, and when is it used? Confidentiality of information. So where can that information be shared? And then disciplinary procedures. And there's also, again, dispute resolution under the special education law. So we always tell parents, ask about your rights because it really can make the difference when a parent is feeling intimidated, scared, and really confused about the process. That explanation of their rights can sometimes diffuse problems before they start. So parents are given these procedural safeguards because really their role and also the guardian's role is so important in this process. That the schools are required by law to give them these. So this also is going to go over what FAPE is, and we explained that a couple of slides ago, but that free and appropriate public education really is at the heart of IDEA. And that is something that needs to be followed and given with fidelity. And so that's why this procedural safeguard is such an important part of the process. Okay, so what is an IEP? The IEP is your child's individualized educational program that is developed, reviewed, and revised in a team meeting. So each public school child who receives special education and related services must have an IEP. Each IEP is designed for one student and must be truly individualized. And that IEP is really going to create that opportunity for teachers, parents, school administrators, related service personnel, and students, when appropriate, to work together to improve educational results for children with disabilities. The IEP, again, is that cornerstone of quality education for children with disabilities. And so let's kind of get into what that process may look like. But just to note here, and I do have parents that will call, and a student will have both a 504 and an IEP. And we may get into the reasons why a little bit later that might be the case. But for all purposes, if a student has an IEP, they do not need a Section 504 plan. As we get into the differences between the two, I'll get into that deeper and explain why that is. But just so you know, they don't need both. All services on a Section 504 plan are included under IDEA. So essentially, all of those accommodations can kind of get swept up into the IEP. But some districts may allocate funding differently, and so they may allocate Section 504 funding for other accommodations. So sometimes that's kind of why that you'll see a family that may have two. But again, if a parent has a question about that, they're going to need to talk to their district specifically and see if that's the case in their district. I don't run across it very often, but like I said, I have in the past. Okay, let's go on to the special education process. So this is the process that a parent would go through when seeking special education services for their child. So we have a referral, and a referral is going to be, again, part of that child find, right? The school or the parent suspects there may be a disability, and the child may benefit from special education. So that's where that referral comes in. It's going to be that initial request from the parent, or even the school can make that referral as well. We always tell parents that it should be in writing because that's really going to set the stage for timeframes as we move through the process. And then you have the evaluation. So the evaluation is the process by which, after obtaining parental consent, the school can then review the data and test for purposes of determining if the student is a student with a disability. So that evaluation process is going to take I guess, let me back up a little bit. After that referral is given to the school, we say in a short period of time. So maybe, give the school 10 days or so to get back to the parent on whether they're going to go ahead with the process of evaluating the child or they're not going to do that. And they need to let the parent know that in writing. But after that process, if they say, yes, we're going to test this kid, and these are the areas in which we want to test, they're going to send a parent a consent form with all the listed assessments or evaluations they want to do. And the parent will then be able to sign off on those and say, yes, please go ahead and test my child. It's at that point where the time frame starts. The school needs to have that testing completed within 45 school days of that consent being signed. So some states it's a little different. Some states it's 60 days. and it's just 60 days. It's not school days, but here in Utah, it is a little different. That 45 school days does not count for fall breaks, Christmas breaks, any of those breaks, and summer generally is not counted in there as well. So it can be, if the parent doesn't get on that until later in the school year, it really can draw out that process until the next school year. So that's kind of a drawback of that. So again, before they evaluate, the school will need to gain parental consent for that. And then after those results have been looked at and all the testing has been done, they will then meet with the parent to go over eligibility. So eligibility upon the completion of the assessments and other measures they'll have that meeting to talk about whether the student is a student with a disability under IDEA and what that looks like for the students. So there's 13 categories of eligibility for IDEA, and there's certain criteria that needs to be met in each of those categories. And so the team is really going to look at those evaluation results, look at that eligibility, and be able to pick a category within the criteria that really speaks to that student's disability and the challenges they have accessing education. And then let's talk about the IEP. So this is kind of where the IEP now comes into place. It's been created, and this is going to be that individualized educational program. This is going to have goals put in place and ways for the team to really monitor progress as the year progresses. What's important to note as well is placement. So this is something that can get a little tricky and confusing for IEP teams. So placement is going to be in the least restrictive environment, or the LRE. And some of you may have heard of that term, but really what it's going to do is it ensures the maximum extent appropriate where students can participate with other students who don't have disabilities. So like their same age peers inside the classroom or in other activities. And so we really want to aim for educating the child with a disability in the least restrictive environment. That's really the goal. And then there's an annual review. So the law does not require an annual review for a Section 504 plan. Maybe only like a reevaluation, and that could take up to 3 years later. But the IEP does require an annual review. If there are significant changes in the child's IEP, they're not making progress, or there have been other issues that have arisen, then that's a really good time for the family to review that plan with the team and go over maybe what the needs are now, or maybe what the child has accomplished, and we don't need to work on that goal anymore. Let's now make a new goal in place of that. So when the IEP process is done correctly, students do benefit by having the correct services on their IEP. And that's where they can start making progress. Okay, so we're kind of going to go over these a little bit more in depth. But when you're looking at evaluation and eligibility, the school really is going to think about, does the student have a disability under IDEA? So again, looking at those categories and the criteria within those categories. Does it adversely affect educational performance? And does the child require special education services? And that's, again, something that they're going to really look for. And like we had mentioned before, parental consent in writing is required for the school to evaluate or reevaluate a child.
I have a question, Leslie.
Sure.
Okay, so the evaluation is the very first part of the circle of the process.
Uh-huh.
Referral, right? And so that's the point at which you've submitted that in writing, and they have approximately like 10 days to come up with the decision, right?
Yes, after you've submitted that referral, the school's then going to answer that request and say yay or nay. Uh-huh.
that's what you're talking about in that next slide, is looking at those criteria.
Yes, yeah. And that's going to be within the evaluation process as well. So when they're answering the parent as, okay, yes, we feel like the student may need some, some testing done. Let's go ahead and do that. They also have these types of things in mind as well. And I will say here too, and sometimes we get this, like a diagnosis equates with being eligible for IDEA, special education, and that's not the case. Just because a student does have a diagnosis does not automatically qualify them for, an IEP. And we get a lot of that where, doctors or other professionals will say, oh, yes, you totally are entitled to an IEP. However, there is a process that the school needs to go through in order to qualify that student. So the school does get audited. Districts and states get audited for how they follow the law, and we don't want to over-identify either, because that can also be detrimental to a student. So that's why that testing, the evaluation is so important.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go over, well, and I want to go over one other thing too. With this evaluation and eligibility, a school cannot refuse to evaluate a student because they are trying interventions. So schools go through, there's a pyramid of interventions that a school can go through in order to support a child. And as the tier goes up and the pyramid, becomes smaller at the top, those are the students that are requiring more support. And generally, part of those students will require special education services. So the school will kind of go through their process of looking at interventions they've done, what interventions are needed, and kind of where we fit in those tier of interventions. And so that's also another, thing that the school is looking at. Okay, so let's talk about IEP IEP development. And again, this is a team effort. So the team is going to look at the child's strengths. So maybe the child exhibits great social skills or reading skills. They're going to look at the concerns for the parent's behavior, or I'm sorry, the children's behavior. So again, parent observations are very important because the parent is the number one, but they have the expertise of their child. And then also, maybe parents are experiencing different behaviors at home than maybe they are at school, or the child is coming home from school and completely dysregulated, or the child is taking 3 hours to do a homework assignment where it would only take, a typical child maybe an hour. So those are all things that are really important as the team develops the IEP. And then also results of the initial or the most recent evaluation data. So that, again, that data is going to speak to that child's needs and the child's strengths. And I will say here too, a lot of parents will go out and get an evaluation done from a clinic, and they wonder how that's used in this process. So the school will not base, again, eligibility just on that one document or that, that testing alone. They really want to do their own testing because they want to see that testing within the educational realm versus just, a very generalized assessment. And so they will take that into consideration, but again, they're not going to base eligibility just off of that one document. And then they're also going to look at academic development and functional needs of the student. Let's see. Okay. So IEP meetings. You must have at least one IEP meeting per year. And that's where that in that circle, that's kind of where that annual IEP meeting comes in. However, the team can meet more often if needed. So I always do tell parents, if your student is experiencing different behaviors or now they have a new diagnosis, or you feel like they're just not making progress, it's important to talk to the team and request a team meeting that they can go over the new needs of the student, or what's not working. I always tell parents too that if your student's not making progress, or maybe they've made 20% progress over the last 6 months on this goal, maybe the goal needs to be thought out and reworked. And so that's something that the parents can request if they feel it's necessary. It's definitely their right. So during the IEP team meeting, the IEP team will look at the lack of progress towards goals and in the general education curriculum. They're going to look at any of the results of maybe new evaluations or assessments. And they're, again, going to look at that information provided by parents because, again, parents are the expert on their child. And then they're going to maybe anticipate the needs of the child. So what is this child going to need next year? If the child's transitioning to middle school, is the child going to have a locker? Is the child going to need to dress for PE? So those types of questions can really come up during transition years, transitioning into middle school and then middle school into high school. What is that student going to need that next year to be successful? And so the team will talk about that, those anticipated needs. Okay, so let's talk about placement. And again, this term least restrictive environment comes up again. So just to remind you, so that's going to be the maximum extent appropriate for children with disabilities to be educated with their children, with other children who are non-disabled. And it's a really important concept because we do strive for as much inclusion as possible for our children with disabilities. And we don't want our children with disabilities to be limited. There's a great benefit in going out to either general education classes or other breakout classes with children who are not disabled. There's a lot of modeling opportunities that can happen there. And statistics do show that children that are integrated and included more with their general education peers are more successful. And so it also benefits those other children who may be typical and they're in the general education setting to be able to work with and be peer models for these other children. So there's a great benefit to that. Okay, let's talk about Section 504. So now all of that is IEPs. And again, that is a federal law. And Section 504 actually falls under a different law. It is part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So let's get into this a little bit more. So that is a civil rights law, and it does prohibit discrimination based on disability. So basically, Section 504 is an anti-discrimination civil rights statute, and it does require the needs of students with disabilities to be met as adequately as the needs of non-disabled students. And maybe you are familiar with Section 504 and maybe the differences between the two. And I'm sure there's probably a little confusion on what the difference is, but towards the end, you should be able to kind of figure out those differences, and then we can talk about some other differences that may not be mentioned on this presentation. Okay, so really the focus of a Section 504 is to give equal access and opportunity. That really is going to be the focus, where an IEP was individualized and specialized education and the plan to get there. Section 504 is all about that equal access. And so there's going to be equal access on a variety of different levels. It's going to be schools, post-secondary schools, federal, state, and government programs. So this is a little bit more far-reaching than an IEP is. And applies to more community outreach as well. Okay, so free and appropriate public education. So we're hearing that term again, that phrase. So let's kind of talk about what that looks like within a 504. So again, it's going to be at no cost to the parents. It's going to have appropriate supports in place in the least restrictive environment. So that's typically for kids with 504 is going to be in the general education classroom. That's going to be typically where those needs are going to be met. And Section 504s have a very broad definition of disability. And this was actually done on purpose through advocacy by consumers with disabilities, parents, and Congress, who wanted to ensure that anyone who had a disability was covered from being discriminated against in the school, the workplace, and in the community. And also mental impairments can be included in a disability that impacts the student or the person as well. This could be mental illness, ADHD, TBI, learning disabilities. So again, it is more broad. But let's talk about what major life activities includes. And again, it's going to include physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major activities. So these are going to be major life activities. This is not in any means an exhaustive list, but these are some of the activities that can be considered for accommodating under a section of 504. So when Congress passed a conforming amendment in the Americans with Disabilities Act of 2008, they wanted to make the Section 504 and Rehabilitation Act consistent with the new law. And they wanted, again, to expand this definition of major life activities. So Congress broadened the definition of disability, so included those other disabilities such as ADHD, diabetes, again, learning disabilities, anxiety, even migraines, that may have not been previously covered under the old act of 2008. So if you're thinking about someone in your life that may have some of these things that is impacting their educational access, then you can consider a Section 504. Okay, so what's interesting about the eligibility considerations, it is a little bit different. So an individual is eligible for accommodations under Section 504 or ADA if he or she has a mental physical impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And that's really going to be the key phrase here, substantially limits. And so that's going to be defined as broad, it's going to be defined broadly. But substantially limits can kind of be something that's subjective and individualized to that specific person. So the new law that measures for impairments that are episodic or in remission must be considered at the time that they are active. So for example, whether or not a student with a condition such as depression, diabetes, asthma, anxiety is in remission, may also be substantially limited and would need to be determined when the student's condition is active. So that really is not going to be the case if the student still has these, but they're episodic. It could still be considered as and being substantially limiting to that student. And decisions should be made without regard to ameliorative effects or mitigating measures. I'm sure I said that word wrong. Okay, so ask the following questions. And this is kind of where that team, that 504 team, the school is going to ask these questions about the student's condition. So is there a physical or mental disability? If so, does it limit a major life activity? What major life activity does it impact? And does the impairment substantially limit hers or her ability to learn or any other major life activity at school? So you can kind of see where an IEP had criteria and categories. The 504 does not. It really is going to be determined upon whether it limits that major life activity. Okay. So we'll talk about the Section 504 process, and remember the IEP process, we have that circle, excuse me, with the different points in the circle. This is a little bit different in the way that we're going to go about obtaining a 504. So under Section 504, a formal process does not need to be done. The school may consider the following: a review of attendance, suspensions, report cards, school-wide testing, class testing, homework and behavior evaluations, and also classroom observations. Again, outside medical or psychological evaluations are welcomed in this process as well. And a review of the problems and previous remedies and outcomes are important to look at, because they're going to want to see what interventions they've done, what they've looked like, has the student made progress on those interventions. And then also, as a parent, we always say, ask what interventions have been tried again, and, what did that look like for the student, and where's the data, right? Because we know that a lot of these decisions are based on data. If the data is saying that the student still needs more support, then maybe that student gets referred for an IEP. So again, that data is crucial. And those observations and evaluations are crucial as well as you gather that data. And also, it's going to be a team meeting of concerned and involved individuals. And that's kind of where that comes together with the parent and the school staff to talk about what those services may look like, what those accommodations look like, and what's needed. And it will also maybe even include academic and formal assessments and evaluations as well. But again, it's not going to be as detailed as an IEP, the criteria and eligibility for an IEP. So having said that, there is a team of concerned individuals, there's a school staff, there really is no set team for Section 504 plan. Parents are included, should be included in the process, and are very much encouraged to be a part of the process, but it is not required under law. So again, they're totally two different things, right? Where in IEP, the student and the parent, the parent of the student was to be involved and was an integral part of that team. The 504, it's not so much that way. All school districts should have a 504 coordinator to answer the questions of the parent and make sure that that 504 is being followed. It's their job and responsibility to make sure that every teacher that works with the student knows what those accommodations look like. Is there training that needs to be made for those accommodations? So that's where that Section 504 coordinator comes into play for the school. And then also, while determining what accommodations need to be made, that can be made with the parent as well as the school staff. So they just need to be knowledgeable about the student and the student and how that disability affects the student. Again, this is usually going to be the school principal, the classroom teacher, and other educators that are working with the child. And the group will review the nature of the disability again and how it affects that student's performance. And it should be documented that the student has a 504 and it should be reviewed periodically. Best practice is that this is written, but not all Section 504s are written. And that's something that, again, is not required, where like an IEP, it is required. So I have had parents that have been very concerned that their child's 504 plan is not written. And I always tell the parents to go ahead and request that be written down so everyone knows what's going on and can look at what interventions and accommodations are being needed at the time and if they're being followed, right? We want these accommodations to be followed with fidelity. Okay, so what is in a Section 504 plan? Again, there is no standard plan, but it's going to generally include specific accommodations, supports, or services for the child, the names of who will provide each of those services, and the name of the person responsible for ensuring the plan is implemented. So I want to give you an example of what a 504 plan could look like. So the example would be teachers who work with Kevin will be provided consultation time with the school behavior specialist. She will help them implement accommodations and behavior management strategies in the classroom. Any teacher who works with Kevin and who isn't trained as a special educator or behavior specialist must watch a 3-minute video about ADHD. And teachers who work with Kevin must also review the attached articles. 1, signs of ADHD they may see in the classroom, and 2, self-advocacy phrases for middle school students. So they really can be as specific as that. On our website, we do have a lot of resources under Section 504, but one that I've used a lot is 100 effective accommodations for students with 504 plans. And really accommodations can be out of the box thinking. They just, we generally hear, preferential seating or less time or more time on tests or less, less assignments, those types of things that we see. But there are so many out there, and really it should be specific to that child. So I really encourage school teams to look outside the box when they're talking about accommodations and needed supports for the kids that are on 504s.
Leslie, I don't mean to interrupt, but in my world, when we talk about writing goals, there's this acronym for writing a good goal, and it's a SMART goal, which the T is time bound. And I wonder if what you were just reading off, if there's a deadline for the teachers to watch the 3-minute video or what have you.
And that's going to depend really on that team. Whereas an IEP, when you're writing those goals, it's really based on excuse me, on that annual school year. Section 504s are really not that way. And that's kind of where, that reevaluation of the Section 504 plan should be, done at least every 3 years, right? So the time frame on that is really, it's not exact. Excuse me.
So it sounds like being an advocate for your child and being involved can be a good idea to try and implement some of those things that are not required, but could be useful. Okay.
Yes, definitely. And that's really why I talk to parents about making sure that, what kind of interventions are they doing? How are these accommodations being followed? What does that look like in the school? So having them be on top of that. Sorry, I'm going to mute for just.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Okay, so takeaway for sure is that 504 plan is not the same as an IEP.
Not the same. And what's really surprising, right, is it doesn't need to be written. So that's just best practice. So that really is kind of odd too. A lot of parents will say, I want an IEP because it has more teeth, right, than a Section 504. But what's kind of bad with that thinking is that a Section 504 gives accommodations. An IEP really changes instruction. It changes that curriculum. It's modifying that curriculum. So they're kind of they're kind of two different things. An IEP can absorb Section 504 accommodations, but if the student doesn't need modified curriculum, it's actually detrimental to that student. And so we really have to make sure that parents understand that and that distinction, and be able to have them understand that, if the child doesn't need an IEP and you're pushing for one, that could be detrimental to their education.
Really important. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. How many more minutes do I have? I don't want to put you guys over.
I would say you could comfortably have 5 or 6.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So again, what is an accommodation? And we've talked about accommodations a little bit, but accommodations are tools and procedures that provide equal access to instruction and assessment for students with disabilities. So it really is going to be based on leveling that student's, leveling the playing field, being able to get that student where they are, up with other kids on that equal footing for them to be able to access that education. And accommodations must be individualized. Remember, we kind of talked about thinking out of the box and making sure those accommodations are specialized to that student. And they are not intended to reduce learning expectations. So that is kind of a misconception. If my student has an accommodation for assignments, then he doesn't need to do all this other work, and that's definitely not the case. Maybe the student is still doing that assignment, but it's going to look like less problems. Maybe they do 5 problems instead of like 30, right? And so, but it's not going to say that student doesn't have to do that assignment. So it really is going to be up to that student and how the school implements the plan and what is available for supports at the school. And it's going to allow for different learning styles of the student. Again, it's got to be specified to that student. So services under Section 504, a student can receive related services such as speech or occupational therapy, and schools must provide related services to students who are eligible for services under Section 504. So I have seen where, excuse me, students maybe with anxiety go and meet with the school counselor once a week. Or students with executive functioning, maybe they're going to go and meet with a mentor that can help them organize their binders. Or so those are all of those kind of related services that are eligible for kids under Section 504. And they can even have accommodations during testing as well. But again, that's something that the school will have to work out with staff. Okay. Again, we want to level the playing field. So making sure that they have those related services and accommodations is going to be super important. And a child's disability may never go away, but the school services might. So it's important for both laws to be to review Section 504 and an IEP periodically. The goal as a parent, as well as the school, should be that the student becomes as independent as possible. And a student who is on an IEP may arrive at the point where he or she no longer needs that specialized instruction or that modified curriculum. I have a lot of parents that if the student is coming off an IEP, they're extremely worried about what happens to my student now. We've had this kind of this cushion for such a long time, and really it's something that needs to be celebrated, right? The student is becoming more independent in being able to access education in a way that works for them. So and again, a Section 504, a student on a Section 504 may come to the point where they don't need those accommodations anymore. So again, reviewing and looking at the student's needs periodically is really going to help. And again, we went over how accommodations must be individualized for the student. So that's all I've got. Do I have any questions?
I know I would love to see that webpage you referenced, the 100 504 accommodations.
Yeah, let me, if you all are going to be here for a minute, I'll put that in the chat. So,
okay.
So thank you, everyone. And
thank you, Leslie.
Yeah, please call if you've got any further questions about families, or even if yourself, if you've got children on IEPs or 504s. So thank you.
That was really well done. So appreciate that, Leslie. And I think a big takeaway from me that, and I've heard these regularly, but to really recognize that an IEP is addressing something differently than a 504. And so you need to understand which one is being pursued for what reason. So if your child doesn't need the curriculum altered, it's a 504, right? If they need it. So there's always qualifiers, right? But I think that's really important to keep in mind. Okay.
Yeah, and I would say too, if parents still want to get, they have that referral, that request for evaluation for an IEP and the student does not meet that criteria to be eligible, the school will sometimes say, you know what, let's put them on a 504 because they do need some help, but maybe not, you know, as much as an IEP would provide. So.
And then just to remind everyone that the Utah Parent Center does have staff like Leslie who can be there to support you and help interface with your school and your school district. My guess is that school districts have different levels of resources around this, and some may be more on top of it one year than another, and all of that. So it's always nice to have someone in your corner. So trying to put things tactfully. I think the other thing that I'll mention is that I think we all know that public education is just stretched really thin right now too. And I think that generally speaking, those in public education positions are all there with the best of intentions, but they are, you know, they have a lot of things coming at them. So if everyone is able to take a deep breath and go into these kinds of things with patience and compassion, then the outcomes will be better for everybody.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'll send that out.
Okay, that's so great. All right, I'll pop my PowerPoint up one more time. All right, so good, so good. Okay, I think we covered some questions. And of course, we'll make sure that Leslie's information goes out in our summary of the meeting, and we'll summarize what we heard today as well. Just want to remind you guys that we have that listserv. That listserv is for you. Love it when we see people using that listserv. So you're very welcome to just email me or email Michelle if that's what you'd prefer, and say, would you please send this out to the list, and we will do it for you. However, there's no barrier for you to just actually grab that and send to it yourself. And so if you have a question, hey, does anyone know where I can find this service for a family I'm working with? We love that. And if you've seen this in action, it's really remarkable because you'll get lots and lots and lots of responses really quickly. This group wants to help, and we love that. And so our next meeting in September will be on the 21st, and we will have UPIC come and talk to us about the things that they do, the quality improvement projects that they do on a regular basis, like asthma, which will be featured, as well as the other help that they can possibly provide for your practice or your organization. And so we're looking forward to hearing from Heidi Bates and Gabby Baragoshi in September. And I think that's it, because it says it's the end of the slideshow. So thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Enjoy the last hot weeks of summer. And if you're able to join us today for our Project Echo, where we'll hear from Jill Connor of Shriners, we'd love to see you there as well. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.